Welcome to Not Your Typical English Podcast. Join Christin, Miriam, and Bea, your English teaching hosts. Dive into engaging conversations beyond textbooks, exploring idioms, phrasal verbs, and unique vocabulary. This isn't your typical English class. It's a fun, memorable journey through language, culture, and daily life. Whether you're learning English or just love languages, buckle up for an amusing experience in Not Your Typical English Podcast. Welcome back to Not Your Typical English Podcast with another exciting episode. I'm Christin, and today, together with Miriam and Bea, we're putting you right in the driver's seat as we step on the gas and take a journey through the world of vehicles and transportation.
That's correct, Chris. Hi, I'm Miriam. We're revving up our engines and gearing out to hit the road as we delve into the different ways people move from one place to another.
But hold on tight. Hi, I'm Bea, and we won't just be sticking to the well-traveled routes. We're ready to veer off the beaten track and explore some lesser-known modes of transportation and travel destinations.
So get ready to set off on an adventure filled with enlightening discussions, insightful stories, and practical tips.
From the thrill of the open road to the serenity of a quiet train ride, we'll be covering it all.
And don't forget to pull over every now and then to take in the sights and sounds along the way as we get around to uncovering the fascinating world of transportation. Okay, I say we get started on our experiences on four wheels. Chris, I bet you in the US learned to drive quite early on, didn't you?
Yes, in the US, you can get your driver's license at 16 and a learner's permit at 14 or 15. I, on the other hand, didn't start learning until I was 17. I had to learn to drive to go to university, which was about a half-hour drive from my parents' house. In America, practically everyone drives cars with automatic transmission, so I never learned to drive stick shift, which has been a bit of a handicap here in Europe, as most cars have manual transmissions. In the end, all that commuting to reach school made me prefer driving highways, and I don't mind getting behind the wheel to drive long distances. What about you, Miriam?
Well, I have to admit I'm terrible at driving. I got my driving license when I was 22, but I actually didn't drive much after the test because I was very comfortable with taking the bus and walking. Then, of course, it became essential, especially as I had to commute to other towns for work. But I still don't like it very much. But, baby steps. Despite my initial nervousness 2 years ago, I finally felt confident enough to hit the road and drive on the motorway for the first time. Chris was my passenger, actually, so
Yeah.
What about you, Bea?
I learned to drive in the UK when I was also 22. But never actually drove there after I passed the test. When I arrived in Italy, initially it was quite a shock to start driving on the other side of the road. And with the lack of respect for road code, the road rage some Italians have,
Yeah.
I now drive quite a few kilometers per week. And having learned to drive in the UK, rain was an intrinsic part of it. But here in Italy, people are unable to drive if it's just drizzling.
Absolutely. It's the same where I grew up. Despite Florida having tropical weather and almost daily afternoon thunderstorms, people there don't know how to drive in rainy conditions either. I hated driving in the rain, but a car was necessary to get from place to place. Now, I live in a city center, so I don't own a car. I get around on foot or with public transport, and it's been a welcome change, also because it's relatively inexpensive. There are a lot of expenses that come with owning a car. I love that Italy and most European countries have trains, functioning bus systems, subways, trams, and more than just one way to travel. Every now and then, when my schedule doesn't line up with a transport timetable, I'll take a taxi. But I have learned I must buckle my seatbelt tightly, close my eyes, and even say a little prayer because Italian taxi drivers can be speed demons.
Well, yes, driving in some Italian cities can be quite chaotic. I do actually own a car, and I must say, in our small town, I feel pretty safe. The only downside of having a car is the parking situation, especially in heavily congested areas. There was this one time when I left the car parked for a while in a zone where I actually had permission, only to discover a few days later that the permission had changed, and I ended up with a fine. Beside that incident though, I have never received fines for anything else. Considering I drive at a snail's pace, it's unlikely.
Well, in almost 10 years of driving, I have never got a speeding ticket either. Just some parking ones. Oops. What about you, Chris?
Okay, I'll admit I have received my fair share of speeding and traffic tickets, both in the States and in Europe. I have a lead foot, which means I like driving fast. I've been involved in a few fender benders, which is what we call small accidents, but they were never my fault, so I've never had a fine for that. Also, I'm terrible at parallel parking in between two cars on a street.
Oh, parallel parking, what a nightmare.
Tell me about it.
Well, as I have previously mentioned, I volunteer with an association dealing with medical emergencies, so in order to qualify to drive ambulances, I had to get some extra practice with some of these maneuvers, so I've got better at parallel parking. A curious situation that happened to me was that once the police asked me to pull over. They saw my uniform jacket on the passenger seat and they just let me go, even though I was coming from the association and not going on duty.
Well, and what about other means of transportation? What's your favorite way to travel? Truth to be told, I absolutely love exploring new places, but the journey itself doesn't sit well with me due to my sensitive stomach. If I had to pick a favorite means of transportation, it would probably be the train. It's more stable, comfortable, and carries a certain romantic allure.
Yeah, I do love the convenience of a train, especially because I come from a place where it's practically non-existent. But for areas of Italy I can't reach by train, I need to take a car, and I have to literally be in the driver's seat, otherwise I suffer from motion sickness. I also enjoy trams and funiculars, the cable or railway cars that go up and down steep slopes. You don't see those in Florida, so it's a novelty for me still.
They're cool. I love traveling by plane, but I now find it quite tedious, as we live quite far from an international airport, so I actually think that hiking is the best way to get to places off the beaten track. But you often need a car to get to the starting point of the hike. Okay, switching gears, we've not talked about these here yet, but those who know me well know that I am a time management freak. So it would be no surprise to anyone when I say that I have never missed a plane or any other transportation method.
Ooh, me neither, Bear. I am so anxious that when I travel, I usually set off hours before just in case something happens. I usually end up arriving at the train station or airport 2 hours before, but I'd rather do that than miss a train or a plane. What about you, Chris?
Okay, not me. I have missed buses, trains, planes, you name it. I'll admit my time management isn't great. I usually push everything to the last possible second.
Alright, let's tackle some grammar rules related to movement and arriving at destination. So, Chris, Miriam, when do we use come and when do we use go?
For example, you said, I was coming from the association. Here we use come because we are describing movement from another place to where the speaker or listener is.
But what if we're talking about a different point of view? For instance, I had to learn to drive to go to university. Here we use go because we are talking about movement from where the speaker or listener is to another place.
Now, when it comes to arriving in or at a place, there's a distinction. We use arrive in when we're talking about arriving in larger geographical areas, like cities or countries.
Right, like when I arrived in Italy. But if we're talking about arriving at a specific defined location, we use arrive at.
For example, I usually end up arriving at the airport 2 hours before. That's when we're referring to a smaller individual place.
And let's not forget about arrive to. Grammatically, it is an incorrect expression. There are some rare cases or idiomatic expressions where arrive to can be used, but it's not related to reaching a place.
That's correct, Chris. An example of this would be, we arrived to find the house empty. Here, arrived to is part of an infinitive verb construction.
Lastly, we have get to or reach, which can be used interchangeably for any destination. You often need a car to get to the starting point of the hike, or I can't reach it by train.
And don't forget about get in, mainly used for trains to mean to arrive at a destination.
Like, what time does the train get in? It's a handy phrase for train travelers.
Let's pump the brakes and explore the vocabulary we've introduced in today's episode. In the driver's seat. This expression refers to being in control or having responsibility for a situation, much like a driver who is behind the wheel of a vehicle, guiding its direction and speed.
Hit the road. When someone says hit the road, they mean it's time to begin a journey or start a trip. It's a colloquial way of saying goodbye and setting off on an adventure.
Off the beaten track, this phrase describes going to a place that is not well known or frequently traveled. It implies exploring less popular or unconventional routes, often leading to unique and unexpected experiences.
Get around. This phrase means to move from one place to another, often implying finding a way to travel or navigate within a particular area. It can refer to using various modes of transportation to reach destinations, or simply to find one's way around a city or region.
To set off means to start a journey or trip. It's similar to hit the road, but carries the connotation of initiating movement or embarking on a voyage.
When a driver pulls over, they move their vehicle to the side of the road or stop temporarily. This action is typically done to allow other vehicles to pass, take a break, or address a specific situation.
It's time for our final segment, the word of the episode. Listen to this and see if you can guess what it is. Did you hear that? What do you think that frustrating scene represents?
If you guessed road rage, you're absolutely correct. Road rage is a term used to describe aggressive or violent behavior shown by drivers on the road, often in response to traffic delays, perceived slights, or other frustrations.
Road rage can manifest in various ways, from aggressive tailgating or following too closely and speeding, to shouting, honking, and even physical altercations between drivers. It is a serious issue that can not only escalate dangerous situations on the road, but also pose significant risk to everyone's safety.
You're right, Bea. And did you know that the term road rage was first coined in the late 1980s by American media to describe the increasingly prevalent phenomenon of aggressive driving behavior? It quickly gained traction as a widely recognized term to describe this dangerous behavior on the roads.
Mm-hmm. In everyday usage, we might say something like, I try to remain calm and avoid engaging with drivers who display road rage on the motorway.
It's important for all of us to stay vigilant and maintain our composure behind the wheel, even in frustrating situations. Remember, road rage not only endangers ourselves, but also those around us on the road.
Well said, Bea. Well, listeners, that's all for today. See you next time.
As we wrap up another episode of Not Your Typical English podcast, we want to extend our gratitude for being part of this language exploration. Remember, learning a language is an adventure. Dive deeper into our previous episodes and share your favorite takeaways with friends and fellow language enthusiasts. Stay curious, keep learning, and let's continue this journey together.